that leaders aren't necessarily always the people who have all the answers. Brene states that sometimes a leader is just the person who says, I see you, I hear you, I don't have all the answers, but we'll figure it out together. And thinking about that from a personal perspective, I think it's really good and just to hear someone in a position of leadership say that it's actually strong and powerful to say, I don't have all the answers right now, but we'll figure it out. Another point that I found that was interesting is how she explains shame. And so Brene Brown, obviously a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, and very educated and very well known throughout the community in her educational prowess. And the way that she defined to me the word shame was interesting. She said shame is actually fear of disconnection. It's actually being able to not be comfortable with connecting with someone, which to me, I didn't necessarily understand that before. And when you're unfearful of it, and when you're vulnerable, and when you express your true self, you're actually connecting with people. And then that shame should be actually not there, because it's the exact opposite of it. Also, what I really found interesting is how she talks about a conference that she went to where the Costco CEO was talking about how the operations were run at Costco and how their year has been, and it was in Seattle, and she said how the CEO is continuously being grilled about questions about actual logistics and everything. And a lot of the previous CEOs that were talking, it was a conference of these big executives, weren't giving, decisive answers to the difficult questions about their operations. But she found it interesting that the Costco CEO was answering questions that were quite difficult and was being really honest with every answer that he was giving. And it wasn't just given a yes or a no or whatever, but he was actually going into the details of, yes, we did this, or no, we didn't do it, and here's why we did it, or here's why we didn't do it. And just doing this for continuously for a lot of time. At the end, everyone stood up and started clapping for this guy after he just talked about a few questions. But nobody else was clapping for anybody else. However, these questions that we were answering weren't always positive. He was just saying, yeah, we messed this up. This is why it happened. But he really made it clear that when you're honest and you're vulnerable and you're telling people the truth, that's how we get progress to being better and being a better human being a better leader. And it's not always just, BSing and pretending everything's okay.
Adding on to that, Vivi, I think it's also important that we're truthful to ourselves. So the book goes into the point, living into our values is what it calls it. And it says, daring leaders who live into their values are never silent about hard things. And so the book explains that living into your values means not only knowing your values and being honest with yourself, but also using them to affect your behavior. There's always going to be times in life that we come across difficult situations, and that puts us into uncomfortable places. And sometimes we may be given an easy way out. We may be presented with a short-term solution that's easier now, but not actually the correct one for the long term. By practicing your values, it forces you to make the correct decision. With being honest with yourself with what you value and what you want, it helps you make the more difficult or uncomfortable choice if that's the right one. It helps us choose courage over comfort. An example of this might be maybe you have a team project at work or a group project at school, and a group member does some work that's a bit sloppy. The easy way out would just be to let it go. Stay silent. I mean, it's their work, not yours. But maybe one of your values is excellence. And being associated with sloppy work would not be excellence. So knowing this and being true to yourself, it might help you have that uncomfortable conversation, saying how, the work quality, it could be better. And in the long run, this is probably the right call. But in the short term, it's just so much easier to just let it slide, let it be. Oh, it's their part, so it won't affect me. Or, you know what, the work is still okay, it's fine. But if you value excellence, well then, just fine isn't good enough.
And to add to that, Ryan, research that Brené talked about also shows that the more curious somebody is, the more knowledgeable you become actually. The more you know, the more you want to know, she says. So it's definitely on the same predicament that by choosing excellence, you'll get the best version of what you can achieve. But also, if you're just curious about how things operate, then you're more likely to be better anyway. That's why I think it's interesting how Brené has this principle in her book that she talks about criticism, her criticism policy. And it's basically that if you're not allowed to criticize anyone in her company without offering a point of view in return that has a specific plan on how to rebuild whatever you're choosing to criticize with your own words. So for example, if you were to say, I don't like how this system is operated or how these people are performing with this task, you cannot actually say that in your company without being like having an actual plan to improve that and how to implement that right away, which I think is really interesting because a lot of in-office bickering sometimes persists because of the people's ability to just say whatever they want to say without actually any concrete benefit of improving that situation.
Related to your point on criticism is the book's idea on feedback, or more specifically, receiving feedback. Now, we all know receiving feedback can be difficult, but we also know feedback can make us better. And there's a few reasons for that. First of all, having an outside perspective is so valuable, as it can give us information that we just can't gain from our own perspective. Having someone else give us feedback from a third-party view is so valuable. And then second, sometimes we'll get feedback from someone more knowledgeable in an area or have some sort of expertise. And being able to get feedback from them allows us to learn a lot quicker than trying to figure it out on our own. As receiving feedback is difficult, the book gives 3 phases that helps take the feedback or receive the feedback. And so number 1 is tell yourself, I'm brave enough to listen. So this might be when the person's not good at delivering feedback. And so the feedback itself could be valuable, but maybe the delivery just isn't there. And it's tough and sometimes it can be hurtful. But if you tell yourself, I'm brave enough to listen, it helps remind you that, you know what, the delivery might not be the best, but let's take what we can from this and let's try and gain from this feedback. The second phrase is, there's something valuable here. Take what works and leave the rest. So this phrase is good if maybe sometimes the person doesn't have an extensive amount of expertise in the subject area, and maybe some of the feedback isn't great, but you know what? I guarantee you, every person that gives you feedback, there's really some portion of it that is valuable. Maybe their feedback is right and it helps you make you a better person. Or maybe, you know what? Maybe their feedback isn't exactly right and you don't agree with it. But still it makes you stop and think, why do I not agree with this feedback? Why do I not think it's correct? And I think it helps you become stronger in your own beliefs and what you're good at, because you're able to confirm what you think when someone else has a different opinion. And then the third phrase is, this is the path to mastery. So this is useful when you receive unscheduled feedback and maybe taking a bit off guard. But I think it's just always good to step back and remember how valuable the feedback is, even if you weren't initially expecting it.